The UFC returns to Abu Dhabi, Yas Island, aka Fight Island, and we were talking about this a little before the pod, and I told you how I think it was Shara Magomedov who said that it was like his dream to fight on Fight Island, which brought me back to 2020 and like how the UFC was teasing Fight Island, and like we all thought it was going to be some like crazy outdoor on the beach fight, and then it was just Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, which is like has been a thing in sports like before. So I thought I don't know if you agree with this, because some people were like disappointed, but I give the UFC a lot of credit for marketing that as well as they did.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're back on Fight Island, Yas Island. Main event was an amazing one. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Corey Sandhagen, and Umar Nurmagomedov stays undefeated, and he proves himself against one of the most elite contenders in 135-pound division. And respect to Corey Sandhagen for not backing down from this fight, because a lot of people didn't want to fight Umar, and Corey really didn't make it easy on him at all, defending 8 of 13 takedowns, scrambling well when he was on the ground, and Umar just did so well on the feet when they were there, which was, I don't know if it was unexpected, but I would say it's more impressive. Like, he truly proved himself finally. And now it doesn't seem like there's much of a long road for him to get to the title. But what did you think, man?
Yeah, so to be honest, to start, I thought we were the kind of fight that we're accustomed to seeing Corey Sandhagen fight, just super technical, precise striking. Like, I thought, and then, the range as well. I thought he was doing a good job of putting that pressure on Umar, and it seemed like I think just after the first round, I think Umar started to like just settle in. Kind of seemed like maybe I don't want to say nervous, but like kind of timid and stuff. Obviously, this is like his biggest fight yet. This is essentially a bantamweight title eliminator, so he gets and Corey's obviously been scrapping to even just get a title opportunity for a long time now. So it seemed like Corey, had the pressure going early, and honestly, like if this was just a 3-round fight, which it obviously could have very well been on like many other cards, I think Corey Sandhagen would have had this one in the bag. But just that for Umar to obviously stretch it over 5 rounds, and just that obvious just relentless cardio and grappling of his.
Even the striking though.
Yeah, so
like he outstruck Corey pretty handily.
That is
like it was impressive.
That is true, and obviously if whether it is Sean O'Malley or Merab, like if Umar is able to put together this complete arsenal of his, like now he's just brought out that he's able to outstrike Corey Sandhagen, like that obviously says a lot. So whether it is Sean O'Malley or Merab holding the title that he's gonna face, I think either way, both of those fights are gonna just bring out a very different kind of fight between whoever it is, but I think they'll both still be very close competitive fights. So I'm not opposed to seeing him fight either of those guys, even though probably the more casual fan would obviously rather see him fight Sean O'Malley, and see if Sean really brings out that striking pace from Umar like Corey did in this fight, and Umar got his hand raised. So yeah, that's a huge win right there.
It really is. And Umar, one of the things I noticed against Sandhagen that I think wouldn't be as much of a strength versus O'Malley, even though obviously O'Malley and Sandhagen have very similar styles, Umar was a lot faster than Corey in this one on the feet, and that seemed to be how he really landed like a lot of those shots, popping in and out. And obviously Corey has to think about the takedown too, which makes it different. But I think that O'Malley fight, you mentioned the casual fans obviously wanting it more, but even like when I think about it myself, it is a fascinating matchup, man, because O'Malley has really good takedown defense and scrambles too. He also has really good jiu-jitsu off his back. And like he's very underrated in that sense. People still kind of like hate on Sean O'Malley because he kind of represents that new age like Gen Z crowd, but
well,
he's dangerous.
That's
man.
why this fight with Merab obviously needed to happen because we know with Sean O'Malley he's able to take it and give it back that much harder, but Merab is obviously he's gonna put that bulldog pace for 5 rounds no matter what. So it's really up to if Merab is able to just straight up out muscle Sean like in the clinch up against the fence and stuff. Maybe he's able to land some short strikes and stuff, and maybe get a sweep and just get like a full mount, something that way. And then like you just mentioned with Sean having to work off his back and how good and underrated that part of his style is.
This fight will test him. That's for sure.
But for this Umar and Corey Sandhagen fight, I'm curious to know how you kind of had it going into that last round, because Khabib, for instance, in Umar's corner, just pretty much telling Umar like you gotta fight the round of your life right here, like this 5th round pretty much, and kind of gave me like just that feel that like this is really that big of a fight, like you really
don't let him bully yourself. But no, I mean,
pretty much.
I definitely, it was close. And I had Umar up because I thought, like you kind of said, throughout the fight as it went on, he was definitely having more and more success. And the thing with Corey, like, he was doing well defending the takedowns and getting up from when he was taken down. But, like, offensively, he just wasn't able to do as much in this fight because he seemed to be kind of on the back foot defending the whole time.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, it kind of reminded me of when Volk fought Islam. Because, like, Volk had his moments in that fight, kind of like Corey did in this one. But, like, when most of the time you're defending, even if you're defending well, you're not really landing a ton of offense. And Corey really didn't seem to hit Umar with much that was giving him a lot to think about. And that's why Umar was able to kind of blitz Corey a lot of the times like he did. And I thought some of the takedowns that he did get were really well timed. And, Corey was doing well, but it still takes, like, a minute to kind of scramble out of that. And that's one less minute that you can land a lot of those strikes. And it's not like Corey was really landing them that well anyway compared to Umar, which is what made it... Because I watched this fight multiple times. The first watch through, I kind of felt like it was a lot closer. But the second one, I was like, Umar kind of had this one. Like, the early rounds were close.
Exactly, the championship rounds were what Umar was able to pull away. And so, that's just how that goes pretty much. But... now what would, I don't even know if you could pull this up real quick, but this is what Corey Sandhagen's 3rd 5-round fight, something like that.
Let's see. That's a good question, actually. He had the
because
one
I know
versus
the San Antonio,
Jan. Sterling was 3. That wasn't a 5-round fight. I want to say he's had a few. Wasn't Marlon Vera? That was a 5-round fight. And I think Font was a 5-round one too. So he's had like a bunch.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know if the cardio was really the problem in this one though. I just think Umar was just better. And he even admitted that. Like I really respect Corey Sandhagen because he's not the type who's gonna make excuses whatsoever. After the fight, he's like, this dude is the truth, and I wouldn't be shocked if he wins the title because he's that good.
I think he should know better than really anybody in this division. Just that that path and what you really have to do to be able to get that title opportunity. It should go without saying that Corey Sandhagen is one of the more fascinating, not only bantamweights but fighters in all of UFC. So his resume in terms of who he's fought obviously it's no shortage of legit household names. So it's just kind of, I just feel bad in that sense, because you mentioned before how, no one wants to take that Umar fight. And, I get it, obviously, but Corey understands, for him at least, there's one path to the title, and you got to get through a guy like Umar first. So
yeah, it seemed like it was a title eliminator for both coming in because Umar said that he was told that he'd be fighting for the title next if he won. And I would imagine Corey, just for taking the fight, was in a very similar position and was probably, I don't know if he was guaranteed it, but I would imagine like that was the impression that was given. And Corey's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, so it is tough. And it's not just because he's ginger, but it's tough to see him lose a fight like this because it really was high risk and sort of high reward. But like, he put a lot on the line thinking that he was going to win this fight. And I'm sure he really believed that he could. And I think he tested Umar better than a lot of people maybe would have been able to test him. But at the end of the day, it's just sad because Corey's had a lot of opportunities and he seems to like always fall short right now just before the title shot, undisputed or just in general. Because like you think of the TJ Dillashaw fight, that was such a close fight that he barely lost. I still think he deserved to win that fight. And then you have the fight versus Petr Yan, the interim title fight that he lost, another close fight.
Yeah.
And then there's this one was definitely a bit more one-sided than those two, but it was close in those early rounds, and Corey showed that he had the potential to win the fight. And it's just tough because he really does deserve a title shot at some point. And this is the third time he's gotten so close, but he just can't get past that extra fight.
Break the glass ceiling.
Yeah, you could even go back to Aljamain Sterling because that was a title eliminator at the time at UFC 250, and that was, in my opinion, a very different Corey Sandhagen, but he was in the same position almost at the title. So it's tough to see that happen to Corey, but he's one of the more intelligent guys in that division, and I think that he'll be back stronger and he'll learn from this, and hopefully someday we'll still see him get that title shot because even in a loss it wasn't a bad performance at all really. So, but I think we should move on to the co-main event because that one was
go
fun
from
too.
one ginger in Corey Sandhagen to another in Shera.
Yeah, that ginger did a little bit better. Not just a little bit, but he defeated Michal Oleksiejczuk. We were talking about this before the pod. I finally got his name down.
Yeah,
it's a lot simpler than we thought it was. You look at Oleksiejczuk's name and it looks like it's just a cluster of letters, but Michal Oleksiejczuk, basically. I know it's probably a tiny bit off, but it's better than Michael O, which is like, we were way off with that one. But Shara Bullet, he defeats Michal by unanimous decision, 230-27s and 129-28. And once again, his striking just looked so dominant in there. And I've noticed now watching Shara, he really gets better and better as the fight goes on. He's not the type of guy who's like trying to take your head off in round one. He's the type of dude who's trying to hurt you.
Yeah,
over the
I
course
got
of
that
three.
feeling from. Well, yeah, I got that feeling from his last fight, where I said, if anything, I thought it was just he was tentative and stuff and was just trying to feel out his opponent. Whereas this fight is more that's just like you just said, like that's who he is, and he's gonna conserve the gas tank and stuff. And then, so he's going to bring out, and especially with someone like Oleksiejczuk, who, especially in this fight.
There you go, by the way. Moving past the Michael O, dude. That was impressive for your first shot at it.
Appreciate it. But, yeah, especially the guy, this guy comes forward the way he does. Like, because I think, just judging from his last fight with Kevin Holland and now this one with Shera, like, he is someone who's capable of grappling, but he is obviously still a very powerful, talented striker. I feel like he's got that like Muay Thai pace to him, that Muay Thai style where he is
Muay Thai toughness too. He's tough as nails. This guy, and in this fight, there's another one
exactly. It. So, but in this fight with Shera across from him, and just to speak about Shera's style again and like just who he is, like to confirm now, just that guy he is going to bring that out of you and, he's going to put it together for an entire fight and, really put it on you and like to where he can knock you out with any given strike. So that's what I got. That's the feeling I got from this fight. And
to me, he just proved again, like he's such a dangerous striker and it hurts to fight him. I feel like that's what I get out of it. It's not a fun experience whatsoever standing and trading with that guy. And shout out to Michal for being so tough in there, but it was just, as the fight went on, it was getting worse and worse. Like round one was pretty close, but I still kind of gave it to Shara, and then rounds 2 and 3, it just was brutal. And I mean, it was impressive that Oleksiejczuk even lasted till the end in that one because he was definitely tested.
Yeah.
But, Shara, he passes another test. This is a guy who is definitely a lot more skilled than his last opponent. And because of that, like, you just have to give him that credit. And I do think that this dude's striking is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So
the jury's out pretty much. Like, I think everyone should know, especially now you get the co-main event on a free card airing on ABC and stuff like.
Yeah, and technically on short notice too, because this was originally supposed to be Diaz and Luque.
Yeah. Wow. Great point. But in terms of what I'm saying about the jury being out, like, I think everyone kind of knows by now, like, all right, he can strike with the best of them, but you put him up against a wrestler, like, is he able to do this to one of those guys? So, we'll just talk about it first just because so we can laugh and stuff. But the Nick Diaz call out is just one of the most funniest call outs.
Yeah, I literally put it in the outline. I'm like, Shara called out Nick Diaz, so that fight should never happen. Like, just like quickly going past, like, we don't need that. No thanks. But
I did see one. This one actually like seems pretty cool though, but it's more about whether or not his opponent would take it. But I saw Shara Bullet versus Paulo Costa, and I think that would
I don't know if they fast track him like that though. Like, I mean, it's possible. It's not a bad matchup either stylistically, because you mentioned him proving himself against grapplers. I was gonna say, I don't think the UFC is gonna make him prove himself against a grappler until he gets really high up, because I think they like this guy a lot, and he's got that star potential because he has that whole like pirate persona to him. Especially with the one eye too, like he looks crazy in there, and he has like the market, and fans really can get behind somebody like this because his style is exciting, even though he's not necessarily finishing guys like rapidly. But he's really fun to watch. His striking is definitely elite. I think he's proved that. But that grappling, it'll be interesting to see if that gets tested. But Paulo Costa, that could be interesting. I mean, at the very least, I think he's earned a ranked opponent. That's fair to say for Shara. But that Nick Diaz fight shouldn't happen. I understand why he would call out Nick Diaz, but no, dude, let's not see that one.
Yeah, he wants to be the one to retire him, but I don't think Nick Diaz should go out like that. So
that'd be so bad. I just don't want to see that at all.
Yeah.
But hey, who knows? I mean, the middleweight. Let's look at the middleweight rankings real quick. Actually, I'm like looking in the top 15, like Michel Pereira. That could be fun. Kyle Barajo. I think that's how you say it. I always mess that one up. Chris Curtis just got a fight versus Kevin Holland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's off the table, I think. And after that, you're kind of getting into the top 10. So I think at that point, like, you'd be fast-tracking him. But there's a lot of good fights, man. Middleweight's turned into a pretty deep division, honestly. So I think it'll be interesting to see who he gets matched up against next. And I'm curious if they do give him a ranked opponent, because he does deserve it. But who knows, maybe if they want to, like, slow play it a little more so he could improve that grappling a bit more, give him some more time, even if it's not tested in his next fight. Obviously, an extra few months of training with that could help it. So, should be interesting to see where Shara Bullet goes from here. And now to move to bantamweight once again. Chito Vera returning, and this was his first fight, I think, after the Sean O'Malley one versus Davison Figueiredo. He loses against Figgy via unanimous decision. Figgy got 2 29-28s and a 30-27. And, I thought this was a really good fight, too. Kind of like the main event. This one was a close one. I had it tied going into the third round, personally. Like, Figgy in the first, he mixed up the striking and the grappling really well against Chito and took that round. And Chito's obviously, like, notoriously a pretty slow starter. Yeah. And then round 2, Chito comes right back and really did well on the feet in particular against Figgy. And then round 3, Figgy becomes the first person to ever drop Chito in the UFC, which is very impressive, honestly. You have to wonder maybe if he came back a tiny bit too soon from that O'Malley fight, because he got hit with quite a few shots.
Well, that's honestly that's kind of in line with how I feel about like the fight in general. And maybe it is fair to say, like, you could you could have tempered expectations for this fight coming in, considering that it is Cheeto coming in so soon after that O'Malley fight, that, obviously really hard fought O'Malley fight, and, Figgy's still on his way up in the in the bantamweight division. So, me coming in, I thought this fight had fight of the night potential written all over it. And not to say that, obviously it couldn't be that, but I think just kind of over the course of the entire fight, it was like, in terms of moments and stuff, but just like I think you could really appreciate it as just a super like technical kind of bout between the two that, over the entire course of the fight, like it does, like every single strike landed, and takedown attempt and control time and all that really does matter. But in terms of like moments and stuff, I thought was rather forgettable, which is kind of unfortunate. But like you just mentioned with Figgy knocking down Cheeto, I just thought that was like incredible. And with Cheeto, like he's able to take those kinds of shots because he got up immediately right afterwards. But just kind of just to commend Davison Figueiredo and like shed light on why he was able to separate himself the way he did as a flyweight. It's because he brings that power now up to the bantamweight division, and he's just he's hanging with these top guys like it's nothing at this point, pretty much is what it feels like. And so with him as a flyweight, like that kind of power it really does, and along with already the elite grappling, like it just overpowers people, it overwhelms guys. So now that he is up at the bantamweight division, like I think it kind of, when you put a Cheeto Vera across from him, it kind of just like it matches. I think it matches that kind of power that Cheeto brings, and then just the toughness that Cheeto brings as well. So that's how I felt. I thought still definitely a fight worth watching, but
Figgy, the other thing with him too is like people kind of forget this dude was the champ at flyweight, and for a while we were thinking that his reign could be quite long because he does have all those skills, but it was like kind of the weight cut that was always a question with him because he was so big at 125 and 135. He's really been able to come into his own with the grappling, especially. His grappling was a strength at 125, but at 135 it seems to have really done him numbers, man.
My eyes have definitely been open up super wide to the grappling part for him as a bantamweight now. So
yeah, you wonder what would be next for him. He did call for a title shot, but I think after Umar's performance in the main event, it's probably not going to happen. But maybe a title eliminator versus Petr Yan could be interesting. I mean, I'd be down for that.
I mean, yeah, dude, like he's already gotten just super legitimate fights already as a bantamweight. So at first was his last fight Cody Garbrandt? His first fight Cody Garbrandt.
The first one was Garbrandt,
Font, and now Cheetah Vera. So yeah, that's what I love about 135. Like there really isn't a shortage of names that you can make your mark on. So obviously Umar with Corey Sandhagen, for instance. So yeah, it is awesome to see Figueiredo just kind of ascend his way up another division, and we'll see if he's able to take another belt sometime soon.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I definitely think there's potential for it. So to go from ascent to descent, Michael Chiesa obviously rear naked chokes Tony Ferguson in the first round, hands Tony Ferguson his 8th straight UFC loss, ties the record with BJ Penn, and it's tough. It's tough to watch. I mean, before we get to the Ferguson stuff, obviously it's a great win by Chiesa when you just look at the fight itself. His back control has always been a strength, and it just looked like Tony Ferguson really has no confidence right now in the octagon, and he just looked a lot more tentative, and he really, like, when you watch Tony's last fights or versus his earlier fights when he was in his prime, Tony would really make things happen in the cage, and nowadays it really seems like he's waiting for something to happen and tries to react to the fight rather than bringing the fight, which is, it's really tough to see when you think about prime Tony Ferguson. I mean, I think of the fight with Kevin Lee or Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, like that Tony Ferguson was just so brutal in there.
Yeah.
And now it just seems like it's kind of vanished in a sense, and this fight was not even close. And I wish I could talk more about the fight because it was a great win by Chiesa, but the conversation obviously is more around Tony Ferguson, and he kind of half retired after the fight. I did like, of course, Tony Ferguson does it like this. Puts one glove in the case, takes the other one home just in case, as he said. I'm not sure if he'll actually retire, though. He even said, like, right after that he doesn't feel like he wants to retire yet. And he said in the interview, obviously with DC, that he loves the UFC and wouldn't want to leave, but he kind of changed his tune a little bit after that and said, well, I know that I have a lot of love from the fans, and if I were to go somewhere else to compete, I feel like they would follow me. And I think they would too. I really think fans right now want the best for Tony Ferguson. And, if he retires, I think a lot of people would be satisfied with all the things that he's done. But if he does go somewhere else, I do think Tony Ferguson can compete in combat sports. It just depends on what basis he's doing that. I don't really want to see him in, the PFL or BKFC, but, maybe something like jiu-jitsu, stuff like that, or maybe even I saw Sam Alvey talking about karate combat, something like that. It's possible. I don't think he's that far past it, but I think that the UFC is the pinnacle, and besides maybe a super fight with Nick Diaz or something, I'm not really sure that there's many guys right now in the UFC that Tony Ferguson's going to be able to compete against.
Well, it's gotten to the point where both of these guys, honestly, I think you wish they both had something better to do on a Saturday night at this point, because honestly, both their careers are stamped, to be honest. But at least with Michael Chiesa, obviously he made this fight look easy, but that actually was a super legitimate, impressive display of jiu-jitsu there with the back take and stuff. So
and that's his bread and butter too. That, if anyone has never seen Michael Chiesa fight, that's how he wins. So for him to do it that easily against a guy like Tony Ferguson too, let's not forget, not too long ago, 4 or 5 years, he had won 12 straight fights, and now he's lost 8 straight. It's just crazy how the sport moves.
So we've talked about it many times on end about the revolving door and stuff, and how fast the sport moves, and you're not gonna. It only so many people actually get to go out on top, and whether it's their own ego that they're able to keep in check. I'm good. I'm coming off a win. I have nothing else to prove. I'm satisfied and stuff. But that ego of a fighter. So you can say for Tony Ferguson in this instance, except Tony Ferguson is constantly now on the losing end, that he just keeps feeling the need to come back and just he's
an ultimate competitor.
Exactly. It'll dawn on a lot of people that that he is a legend of the sport and UFC, and that should be still talked about and stuff and respected, because man, we'll see people on Twitter and stuff discrediting Tony and stuff, and just
pandemic fans. I mean, it's true though, because if you have been watching the UFC before 2020, you know what Tony Ferguson was, but it's almost sad in a way that because the UFC has gotten so many more fans since 2020, because they were the first company to come back after the pandemic, and it was really quick. And obviously Tony Ferguson fought Justin Gaethje on that first pay-per-view and got destroyed, and that's what started this whole rapid decline in his career. And it just sucks that a majority of these newer fans only know him because of that, and they didn't see how scary he was when he was in his prime. Nobody wanted to fight Tony Ferguson. People were really just not trying to get in the cage with the boogeyman. I mean, you remember those old graphics too, before the losing streak? It would be Tony Ferguson's last 8 opponents, and it's just all these fighters covered in cuts, blood. He really would hurt people in there. And the thing with Tony, he wasn't the type of guy who was going to dominate a whole fight, but he was the dude who, if you're not going to put him away, he's going to get you. And even if he didn't start a fight off well, he would brutalize you in the later parts of the fight. I mean, I think, I mentioned the Kevin Lee fight earlier. Kevin Lee was dominating that fight in the early portion. And then when he kind of gassed out, Tony just, oh, God, man, he just beat the crap out of him. And people who are newer fans, they really got to go back and watch old Tony Ferguson, because that's how you should remember him. Like El Kakui, the boogeyman, in his prime, the guy who everybody was afraid to fight. And, it sucks to watch him be at this point in his career, because, I said this that day. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. Like, one of the main reasons why I got into the sport. He was really in the midst of his prime when I was starting to watch. And, it was tough. Like, even watching that half-retirement speech, like, I was, like, kind of just like, man, like, we're really going into a different era now. Like, Tony Ferguson, I can't even fathom this. So, it was a rough thing to watch, and I'm honestly glad that this wasn't like the co-main or something, because I think it would have left like a sour taste in my mouth leading into the main event. It was a tough moment on the card, and it sucks for Michael Chiesa too, because like we've been saying, it was a great win, but he's not really going to get a whole load of credit. And respect to him too, though, because he won the fight and he immediately was like, talk to Tony Ferguson, like, this dude's a legend. Give him the mic, let him say what he wants to say. And that was all class from Michael Chiesa, one of the coolest dudes in the sport, in my opinion. So, it was an interesting one, to say the least. So
it's still, like, that drive and will to compete from Tony Ferguson is still just really inspiring and motivating, honestly. And I don't think that's something that should be taken away from him, but like, it's just, it is tough, because it really is just like he's that conflicted, like he really can't stay away, because at the end of the day, like, this is still a profession and it's still these people's livelihood. So just fighting in general, like, it's not a game. So, like, it's just kind of like, it's unfortunate to see Tony keep getting finished in all these ways. And
it's just not the same guy in there, really, mentally at least. It's just tough. He doesn't seem to have that edge anymore, which is, it's a rough spot to be in, honestly. And if it is the end, respect to Tony Ferguson. I mean, he's given me so many memories, like, as an MMA fan. So if it is time for him, just what a career he's had. And if it's not, I don't think his UFC career is going forward. So if he does compete somewhere else, hopefully it's somewhere that'll give him a just shot at winning and give that legend the respect that he deserves. So, But that's all we're going to talk about for the Abu Dhabi card. Now we're going to get into a little bit of boxing, and the same weekend, which is cool. I love when we get like a big boxing fight and MMA the same weekend. But Terence Crawford becomes a 4-division champion, defeating Israil Madrimov by unanimous decision. I say we talk about the fight first, because I think anybody who's been watching us for a bit knows that we hold Terence Crawford in very, very high esteem. So for Madrimov to test him in the way that he did, he was landing a lot of right hands throughout the whole fight. I thought it was really impressive. But Terence Crawford, man, he's just that dude. Like, he'll win in any way that he has to, and he outpointed Madrimov in the end and won by unanimous decision.
I just thought it was impressive enough for Madrimov to, be the one pretty much fighting until we got, obviously, into the later rounds, and especially that round 12 that Bud just dominated. But for Madrimov to pretty much be the one fighting on the front foot for the majority of the fight and backing Terence up, and, just Bud, like, this is why he's arguably the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, is because, he is able to adjust, and even off the back foot and counter and stuff, like, switching stance and whatnot, like the footwork, like, it's also elite and stuff. And that's all he's really putting behind those punches and stuff. And there was a point in the fight too that Madrimov's corner was just urging him to, like, it's great that you're pressuring him and stuff, but you got to put combos together and stuff. And for Bud, like, that kind of stuff just comes easy and stuff, just like, triple jab and stuff, and the
also going up in weight, he's so much faster.
Yeah.
And that's like a thing to note too. It's easier for him to kind of blitz in and out. We were talking about it even for the UFC main event, kind of how that speed advantage really helps on the feet. So
just like, I think it was like that round 7, there just wasn't a ton of action and stuff, and it was like at that point we were like, oh man, like Terence Crawford's not gonna finish an opponent for once. Like, this is new. So, and that's what happened. It obviously took all 12 rounds, but just when you got to that 12th round, like, you could just, I thought, because the fight was so close anyways, like, you really were like holding your breath, like, as to who was gonna win. But just like Terence Crawford just absolutely turned it up and that last round, and he was landing just about everything he wanted there, and seemed like right then and there he could finish the fight. But he won decisively, handedly anyways. There was one scorecard that said 116, 112, and I thought it was closer than that, 115, 113, but that goes to show you that like that. This dude,
I feel like you can't overanalyze boxing scorecards,
no,
man.
You can't at all. It is, because it is so fucking raised.
Because you could talk about that Andy Ruiz fight that was before. I don't know if you saw that. Like, that one was a bit suspect. So not to get into, because I definitely want to keep talking about Crawford.
Yeah.
Because that's why I don't always love talking about boxing, because like the little bits of like corruption that you see, and it just really bother me. Like, that's kind of what's made me fall a little bit out of love with the sport. Because for anyone who's been watching this, they know that like that's where I started my combat sports fandom in the boxing world. But when I was like growing up, there's always been some form of corruption in boxing, but lately it's just, I don't know, some of these scorecards that we see are just out there. But to go back to Terence Crawford, though. Yeah,
I know. It's just like, I love talking about fighters like this anyways, like Bud, and even after the fight, he was aware, like, it wasn't his best performance, obviously, and not making any excuses for like coming up in weight and stuff. That's
to
just
me, though, like, it's more impressive when it's a fight like this where he was tested and he still found a way to win. Like, that shows you just how good this guy is. And if the Errol Spence fight didn't prove it, this is a fight that really proves he has that grit that a champion really needs. And I really want to hop into this conversation because I think it's such like a fun debate to have. But obviously, Turki Al-Sheikh, who's turned into one of the most prominent figures in boxing promotion, he really wants Canelo versus Crawford to happen to turn him number 1 pound for pound in the world. And man, like, the first question you really have to ask is, what weight would it even happen at? I think for those who don't really know much about the boxing world, or like Canelo, I think that it's fair to say that Canelo is not going to compromise himself whatsoever to get this fight. He has an ironclad legacy. He doesn't need this fight as much as Crawford maybe wants this one to happen, because I think it would do a lot for Crawford's legacy. But this fight that Crawford just had was at 154. Canelo's been competing at 168, so you'd have to imagine that they'd either meet in the middle at 160, or what I think would maybe probably be the more likely option is Bud would have to go all the way up to 168, because like I said, I just don't see Canelo compromising himself in any way. He's such a shrewd businessman in there. And either way, like, he's got a fight coming up too, so it's not even like a foregone conclusion, because he has to get through Berlanga September 14th. But I don't know, what do you think of the possible super fight between Canelo and Crawford?
Yeah, I thought what you just said about how shrewd of a businessman Canelo is, like, honestly, if that wasn't, I feel like that came out super evident with the whole controversy and drama from his last fight with Munguia and Oscar De La Hoya. Like, he stood his ground. Like, he knows his worth, and he knows the kind of transcendent star he is, and how huge of a figure he is for the sport of boxing, and just just Mexican fighters altogether. Like, he represents this kind of stuff in an amazing way. So
he really represents like a whole fighting culture. out of Mexico. I think that's why they love him so much.
Absolutely. So like, when it comes to what Canelo has, you could say, left to prove, or what fights he still has out there and needs to fight, at this point, like, you could really say none. But if there were I'd say if there were 2 fights left that Canelo could like pretty much, I guess, wrap his career up with, then it would be that David Benavidez and then hopefully a Bud Crawford fight to determine who's number 1. But that's just at this point. So this Berlanga fight, I'm pretty sure I would have to think is a mandatory title defense. So
I never really know. Like, I can't say because I'm not like really an expert when it comes to the boxing. But also Canelo, he does kind of, he's very careful with the opponents that he picks. So this could just be like one of those types of scenarios where it's like, oh, this could be a good fun fight, but like something where Canelo's like, I'll probably get it done.
Exactly, yeah, and that's so you gotta love about him at this point. So like
that's what some people hate about him though. They're like,
that is true
because they kind of give him the same like shit that they give Floyd, like in that he had later in his career, like the fact that Floyd would kind of handpick his opponents for a while, and like even the Manny Pacquiao fight, Floyd kind of waited until Manny was a lot older and dominated that. So I don't know. That's like the other thing that makes me think that it's less likely to see him face Terence Crawford, personally.
Yeah,
I think Terence would have to do more work to get there, which sucks because Terence is so good, and I do want to see that fight, and that's partially why I like MMA is so much better than boxing.
Yeah, and there's people that'll nitpick when it comes to Canelo's record. Like, there's people that'll nitpick certain fights and stuff. So
that's
like
boxing in general.
Yeah, exactly.
You do that with anybody.
He hasn't, they'll say stuff like he hasn't fought a legitimate boxer since Triple G won, and like, besides Bivol, like he hasn't fought anyone besides KO Plant or Jamel Charlo, and then kind of just discrediting everything else. But like,
remember when he fought Billy Joe Saunders? I remember that was crazy. I thought
that too,
Billy Joe had me believing in the hype for a little bit. He was talking so much crap, and he has still not fought since Canelo beat him. Yeah, dude. Hope he's doing all right. Like, I swear, like genuinely, like all jokes aside about how dominant that fight was, do hope Saunders is doing okay. I mean, seriously, because if he hasn't fought since then, who knows what man. That kind of did to his psyche.
Yeah, you're right. I do actually feel bad in that sense, because you have to come in with that kind of confidence against someone like Canelo, but like
Canelo hurt him bad in that fight. I think he broke his jaw.
This shit will humble you so fast.
Canelo has it, man. That's why I don't hate on him as much as maybe some other people do, because when he does really show up and he decides, like, I'm going to really put this dude through the ringer, he really just messes people up in there.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, it really is like a canvas these guys paint, and all these fights do add up and stuff. So, Canelo's gotten to a point where, he essentially, like, transcends the sport. So, at this point, like, why that fight with Bud Crawford is so talked about heavily, and why it would be such a super fight, and how competitive would it really be. A lot of people have their doubts, I guess, after this Bud Crawford fight, but honestly, I still think it would be a pretty competitive fight and worth watching. So
it would be interesting. I'm just not sure that it happens, and I would definitely want to think about it and hyperanalyze it more and more if it was going to happen. But since I feel like it probably just isn't going to be next, I don't know. Maybe another day. That would be another pod from us. But I'm glad you kind of mentioned like Canelo's place in combat sports, because I did want to go into this debate as like a last conversation here before we go. But Canelo Berlanga is obviously happening the same night in the same city as UFC 306. So UFC 306, obviously at the Sphere, that's going to be a huge card. O'Malley versus Merab, and then Grasso versus Shevchenko 3. And Canelo is going to be at an MGM Grand. I can't believe they're making Canelo compete with the UFC again in the same city. Like, it's not the same weekend. Like, if Canelo was fighting in like Texas or Mexico, I'd be like, all right, whatever. Like, he always fights on the same weekends every year. It's like Cinco de Mayo and Mexican Independence Day. So, like, you always have to expect a Canelo fight those weekends. But the fact that they're ballsy enough to put it in the same city, I don't know, man. Canelo's like a huge star. Like, we have to say that. People who are... And boxing and MMA fans are so divided. Like, they really do hate each other sometimes. And this is one of those ones where I see the argument quite a bit, because the boxing fans are like, Canelo's world class. Of course he's bigger than the UFC. And then the UFC fans are like, they're putting this boxing match. Canelo's just going to steamroll somebody over the UFC. Like, come on now. I don't know where I really fall on that. I think it's actually pretty comparable, which makes me curious of what's going to be bigger in the city on the night. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see how they compete that weekend. Dana White did not mince words talking about the MGM Grand kind of screwing this one up. So I don't know. Who do you think? What do you think is the bigger fight? I'm making you go first. You're going to have to piss somebody off before I do.
Okay, well, look, because... So, like, Dana, yeah.
I'm just saying personally. I'm not saying speak for everybody.
You just said something about Dana not mincing words about the MGM Grand, but Dana's also... I don't know if Dana's not mincing words about this because of that, or Dana's not mincing words about this Sphere card, like, going to be huge, like he says. He's going to, this... Obviously, we know what the card is now, but he's saying it's going to be huge and stuff. And
it adds a lot of pressure to the UFC now that Canelo is fighting in Vegas, because now if this event at the Sphere, which he's been hyping up more and more as time goes on, if it doesn't live up to that hype and then the Canelo fight is insane, people are going to have that conversation. I mean, the last time that I think Canelo competed with the UFC was I think it was Diaz Masvidal, and if I remember right, they literally made Canelo and his opponent sit and wait until after Diaz versus Masvidal ended, because the UFC, that card was so big. It was the original BMF title fight.
At the end of the day, it's more about who's the more household name, and that is Canelo. Like, it is. So it is fair for the boxing fans to be like, yeah, Canelo's world class. Like, Canelo's bigger than UFC altogether. Like, this is obviously, like we just mentioned before, like, this guy represents a whole culture essentially when it comes to boxing. So,
and Canelo too, in one fight, makes probably more than like the entire card for a whole UFC month. Especially if you want to put the Apex cards on there.
What UFC's doing is, like, this is a brand new venue that they get to obviously try their hand at and stuff, and
I hope it goes well too.
Yeah,
they did put the right guys and girls on the card.
Yeah, exactly. You got Sean O'Malley as the main event. Noche UFC, they got Alexa Grasso.
And Valentina's a big star in her own right too. So Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez, like, that's
at first I was like, the Mexican fight fans, like, are they going to be, like, conflicted and be like, what the hell? Like, we got a Canelo fight and Noche UFC going on at this, same time, the same city and stuff. So, like, people that want to go to these events and stuff for now.
I think the Mexican fans are going to ride with Canelo. They always do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, dude, at my old job, I worked with, like, a few guys who were from Mexico, and, like, they used to call me Canelo because obviously I have the red hair, and Canelo just means cinnamon. So, like, that's all it really is. And they would, anytime there was a Canelo fight, they were always talking to me about that, because they knew, like, me and you did this, and this was like a couple of years ago at this point when we just started it, but they knew that I had been doing it. And so anytime Canelo would fight, those guys would always be talking about it, but they were never talking about the UFC. So, like, if we're just talking strictly the Mexican fan base, I do think a lot of them gravitate towards Canelo. I mean, like we've been saying, he's an icon for that country, man, and I think that anytime he fights, he's such a superstar. So I think at least the Mexican fans probably going to gravitate towards Canelo, but all of combat sports maybe more towards the UFC.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I'd say agreed. I think those UFC fights are going to be really good anyway. So And then what the UFC fans are saying too, in terms of it's just another name to add to Canelo's resume that he's gonna steamroll. So like,
you never know until the fight's over, right? Who knows? So we could say one thing and then this dude could pull off the craziest upset. But I mean, I'm not gonna act like I'm this huge boxing fan anymore, and like I'm not gonna try and analyze it because I really couldn't tell you. But I just think about Canelo and how good he's been over the course of so many years now. It's hard to pick against him, that's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see who wins that little battle in September, and we'll definitely be talking about both that weekend. That'll be a fun THH pod. We just did THH 68, recapping 304. Watch that. And then next month, this month actually, because it's already August, we'll be doing the UFC 305 recap. But then obviously, come September, that's going to be fun, recapping the Sphere card and the Canelo card. I'm looking forward to that. I love those pods where we really have just a ton to talk about. But, to move on real quick, before we go, just talking about next week, what's going on. There's a card at the UFC Apex. There's not really much going on in general in combat sports, honestly, next weekend. So we're going to have a fun main event between the heavyweights at the Apex. I don't know about you. I love seeing the big heavyweights in the small cage. I just feel like it's always like a car crash. So Tybura and Spivak, they're both really good on the ground. I would say Tybura is a little more well-rounded, but I think Spivak makes up for that with his ground game. And it sucks. The co-main event, I was excited for this. Chris Gutierrez versus Javid Basharat. That just got scrapped. So Definitely have to hope that the main event delivers at the Apex. And we're getting ever so closer to UFC Vegas 100. 98 is in like October, I think. They had just announced that.
So then they'll have 99 this year too.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be November or December.
Imagine they open 2025 with UFC Vegas 100.
It's just this huge card. I would love it, man. It sucks that we've been talking about that all this time, and we're definitely going to be disappointed whenever they make them, because they're definitely not thinking about it in the same way that we're thinking about it. So either way, though, we've hyped it up for so long. We're still thinking about what we're going to do for UFC Vegas 100. I think at this point we have to do something special. We'll think that over. Thankfully, we have a few months, and I think it'll be easier once we know what fights are on it. And what the main event is, and that's when you guys should maybe be on the lookout for an announcement of what we're going to do for UFC Vegas 100. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for next week. We're probably going to be talking about the heavyweights at UFC Vegas 95, and we'll see y'all.
See ya.
Just like a superstar, doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.